doing, guys? Today we are working on the grab bag Kohler. Specifically, we're going to go ahead and lap the valves, set the valve lash, and what else are we going to do? We're going to do a bunch of stuff, and we might even start putting the engine together in this video. I've already lapped the intake valve. I have it here. You can see it's right in the middle of the face of the valve, which is pretty much exactly where I would like to have it. I also went ahead and sanded and polished the stem, the valve stem itself. So this valve is all set to go. The exhaust valve, on the other hand, I do need to go through the process. Essentially, what I'm going to do is make sure the seat is clean, make sure the valve face is clean. I got my lapping compound, and then I'm just going to drop it gently into the seat, and this use my thumb and my fingers to kind of spin it, because trying to use one of those suction cup valve lapping tools, it just never seems to work. So and then once I get all that done, then I'll polish the stem, get that all set to go. And then from there, we can put the cam and the lifters in and start talking valve lash. With all the parts sanded and polished, I basically used 2000 grit sandpaper and a little bit of WD-40. I sanded the shafts, the valve stems, I should say, it's not the shafts, to just get all the little scuffs and crap. Now, it's not mint. You can still see there's right there at the end of my thumb, you can see that there's a wear mark still in the valve, because they're used valves. So, but took anything and everything that's a little bit of a score that polished out. I polished out all of the stems of the lifters. Again, you can still see some of the wear marks. I even polished the faces of both of the lifters. But this particular lifter has a problem. And if you can see right there, let's see if we can get it there. There you go. You can see that there's a little bit of a cup in the lifter. So I'm going to have to file that down and get that flat, because I'm not going to be able to measure the lash of that valve. So this is going to be a little bit of trial and error. I'll have to set it up with the cam and the pin in the motor with the lifters in one position, measure the lash, and then if it's way out, I may have to take the cam back out and flip-flop the lifters, whatever was in intake, put it in the exhaust, whatever was in exhaust, put it in the intake, and then remeasure it and see where we are, and then put the specific lifter with the specific valve to give us the closest lash. So let's get that going. All right, so I went ahead and I ended up having to get the grinder out to grind the end of the lifter. I don't think I did too bad for an eyeball job. I mean, that looks pretty straight. And yes, I didn't go all the way. Yeah, you can still see a tiny divot, but for what we're looking for to measure lash, that's going to be more than acceptable. So let's go ahead and throw these parts in the motor and figure out how bad we are. For initial setup, we are way off. If we take a look at the intake, you can see the lash is way too big. And if we look at the exhaust on the left side, that's way too tight. So we're going to have to go ahead and I'm going to have to go ahead and pull the cam out and swap the lifters around. We are way out of specification. Where is it? It's right there. Sorry. So valve clearance intake cold 5 to 9. Valve clearance exhaust cold 11 to 15. All right. We are 25 thousandths on exhaust, and we're 20 thousandths on we're 20 thousandths on the intake. So I mean, we're like way out of specification, almost to the point where I don't even think the engine would run very well. It's going to make a lot of noise. Let me see here. I'm doing this by, yeah, so yeah, it's 20. It's moving the valve a little bit right now, but it's 20 thousandths and 25 thousandths. So I don't know. I don't know if, But I mean, it seems to work good, you know, but you hear that little clicking noise? There's going to be a lot of noise out of the valve train. But like I said, I wasn't gonna go cutting the valve seats. Well, the thing I might do is I might go out to the shed and grab and look at the lifters again and see if I have two that might be in a little better shape, and then go from there. Maybe I might have to mismatch, even though they may not rotate. I got those divots. I may have to just pick the two that closes the gap the best. All right, let me go get those things. These are all of the used lifters that I have. This particular lifter is in real rough shape, and it measured out 1546. This one measured out, and I got them numbered. This is 1543. This is 1547, 1547. These are the two that were in the motor, and my little grind job really took a lot of material off it because it measures 1521. I know I didn't do anything with this one, and it's 1535. So just on sheer length, these two are the ones that I'm going to put in the motor right now and see where we are, irregardless if there's divots or anything like that in the center of them. Where I'm going to have to use those just on the basis of sheer length. So let's get those in and see where we are. Okay, the lash itself is in much better condition than it was. The intake is at 15 thousandths, which is about 4 thousandths out of specification. The exhaust is way too tight. It's like less. I think it's like 7 thousandths on the exhaust, and it's supposed to be like 11 to 15 thousandths. So that's going to rear its head. The heat of the motor is going to probably cause this valve not to close all the way. So I have no choice but to open that up a little bit. So I'm gonna hit it on the grinder a little bit. I'm gonna try to get it to 11 thousandths, the tight end of it, and then we'll call that good. All right, so I've set the valve lash. I think I said the intake was 15. I apologize. It's actually 12. And the exhaust I set to 12. So they're both set to 12 thousandths. That's a little bit, because it's what the intake cold is 5 to 9. We're running at 12 because that's what it was. I'm not cutting the seats. That's what it is. But the exhaust was just way too tight. It was like 7 thousandths, and that was going to run into a problem with running the engine. So I did grind the end of the valve down, and I set the lash at 12 thousandths for both intake and exhaust. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clean everything up, and we're going to move on to the next step. Oh, these are the two original ones that I started with. So let me just show you what I'm going to do with those. Bye-bye. The other ones here, which are in rough shape, I'm just going to go ahead and throw them back in the bucket. All right, on to the next step. Now that we got the valve lash somewhat finalized, it's finalized, it's just not totally within specification. The next thing we're going to do, or the next thing I'm going to do, is end gap the new ring set. And if you watched my first video, I think it was, I'm not going to use a Kohler set of rings. I'm going to use a Clinton set of rings. And the reason for this, and I'll kind of go over it real briefly, is back 5-6 years ago when there wasn't a real aftermarket for the K91s. They were only doing like, the bigger ones, 10, 12s, the 14s, things of that nature. But now that the aftermarket supports the K91, what I'm about to tell you really doesn't matter anymore. The ring sets for the K91s about that, back then were quite expensive. So what I did was I did some cross-referencing to see what ring set, other than a Kohler set, that would fit into a K91, to see if I can get them for a better price. And the Kohler ring sets at the time were probably $30 to $50, somewhere right in there. And this Clinton ring set, which cross-references right into a Kohler K91, literally I bought 4 or 5 sets of these rings for like $10. Now you do have to ring end gap them because they're a little bit too, they don't quite fit in the bore. But the thickness of the ring, all three, is the perfect size for the lands of the piston, as well as it is for this size bore. But as a Clinton motor. The part number is 235121-500. Now, the real part number is right there. The -500, the Clinton always posted their part numbers with a 500 if it was a replacement part, not a I guess I don't want to say a factory part, but the part this part number would have been the part number on the parts sheet when they were putting the engines together at the factory. Anything outside of that was a 500. This is a 20 over ring set, so it is a little bit bigger than what we need. Now, people give me a lot of business about putting oversized rings in theoretically a standard bore. Now, we got to remember this bore has some wear in it. No, it's not at the point where it needs to be bored to 20 over. This probably could be used, you probably could do a 10 over on this. But in any event, the amount of friction or pressure that this ring will put on this bore is minuscule. I'm not going to be running this motor every single weekend for the next 40 years. If I was going to do that, yes, wouldn't be advisable. It would wear into the bore quite heavily. I'm going to run this motor, literally a couple times around a show on my tractor. I mean, I'm not going to work it. So keep the oil fresh and it'll be fine. It literally will be fine. I've never had a problem. I've done this a number of times on these Kohler engines. So I'm just going to break out the Dremel, put the little grinding wheel on the Dremel. Going to start end gapping these rings into the bore. I like to put a little bit of WD-40 in the bore, a little WD-40 on the ring, so that way it kind of slides in and out easy, and it'll be less tendency to create a scratch or a mark in the bore. And when we go for the ring end gap, we're going to go for this. We're going to go 7 to 17 thousandths. My opinion is to run it probably about 9 thousandths to 10 thousandths. I don't want to be right on the 7 because these rings are a little bit oversized. They can tend to run a little hotter at first, which means you could get ring bind, and we don't want that. So I think what we'll do is we'll look for about 9 to 10 thousandths end clearance, or end gap, I should say. So let me break out the tools and let's get grinding. Okay, got all the rings done. I got one here in the bore. I ended up, let's see if we can get this to focus. You can see the end gap. Where is it? Oh, there it is, right there. I set the end gaps at 12 thousandths. All of them. I was able to nail all three to 12 thousandths. Just shoved it down in the bore like I always do. Just push it down to like the second land, or at least beyond. If you're using an old bore like this one, get it below anywhere there would be a ridge. So that way you can get a good reading, and then just stick the feeler gauge between the ends. It was 12,000. The reason why I set, everything at 12,000 is because I noticed when I was taking some measurements in different places in the bore, it was like different end gaps, because the bore must be like a little bit of not perfectly like a perfect cylinder. So I opened up the gaps just a little bit, just so I won't get any sort of bind or anything like that. We're still well within the acceptable range of 7 to 17 thousandths. So I'm going to go ahead and just install the rings on the piston, just using my ring expanding tool, no big deal. And then we'll move on to the next part. There we go. The piston is all set. All of the rings are in. I put them in just like the Clinton directions say. So the little bevel on that one is up. The little edge is down, and then the oil control ring doesn't matter. So we're all set there. We are going to now do, let's see, tomorrow it's supposed to be like 70 degrees and super sunny. So I'll show you what I'm going to do next tomorrow. Before actually assembling the motor, I decided to hit it with a little bit of engine clear coat just to bring out the patina on the motor. And there it is. It actually looks pretty cool. I just put just enough clear on it just to kind of seal everything up and try to keep as much of the old paint and rust that I could, you know. And you can see that the oil pan is green, the block is blue, the head's going to be red. So it's going to, in my opinion, it's going to look the part. All right, guys, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you're enjoying that this little grab bag Kohler is coming together. In the next video, we'll actually start doing the assembly of this motor, and hopefully we'll get it started very shortly. So thank you again for your viewership. Like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like, please ring the bell below so that way you get notification when the next video comes up. And until then, you have a great day.